Jeetu, thank you so much for doing this. Great to talk to you as always. I want to start off with something that just like I've been so obsessed with lately. Although I have to I just to be totally transparent and honest, like I don't use it because I'm a risk averse journalist, and I have to change that. And maybe that will happen after this conversation. But are you using OpenClaw? Have you gotten into this at all?
I, so we have separate machines with different identities with which we've actually taken a look at the stuff, but I don't put it in my work machine because right now the OpenClaw is, not completely approved by our security people. But that's why we announced what we announced this week on securing OpenClaw. So in fact, if you take a step back and say, what is happening in the world right now, it's worth reflecting on the dynamics that are occurring. So, we've been talking about this for a while, but there was a seminal moment in AI with ChatGPT's introduction. We call it the ChatGPT moment, where AI got to massive awareness, and every company was put on notice to say you need to have a strategy for AI. I think that similar moment, ironically, in the same month, 3 years later, happened once again with agents when OpenClaw was released in November of 25. And what you see now is these agents are going to be able to conduct tasks and jobs for us fully autonomously. And the definition of an agent is it has access to your systems and tools that can work on your behalf. And these agents, though, Reed, they're like teenagers. So they're supremely intelligent. They have no consequences, no fear of consequences. It's not like you can fire an agent, right? And so, and the thing that's interesting is the risk of something going wrong with a chatbot is it gives you a wrong answer. The risk of something going wrong with an agent is it takes the wrong action, and sometimes those actions are irreversible, and they could be actions like I'm going to debit money from your bank account. And so you have a meaningful amount of exposure from a security standpoint and safety standpoint that needs to be thought through as we go through this, which is why, actually, frankly, the reason that Apple Minis are all sold out. Why is that? Because people have decided to say, I can't run this in my regular environment, so I'm going to create an isolated environment. So what we did was we launched a whole set of open source technology at RSA around securing agents, and I'm sure I'd be happy to talk.
It's funny. I mean, you mentioned the Mac Mini. This is really, I think what's sort of interesting about the OpenClaw is like it's a consumer thing. It's not a, I mean, yes, I agree. It's like, obviously, I mean, I was at GTC last week. Like, I listened to the whole Nima Claw announcement, and it's super interesting. But I think it's a bigger deal on consumer because it's something that I think companies, I think enterprises were already kind of doing this. They were already like, exploring like, how do we give these agents tools and use lots of tokens, throw tokens at the problem. But now consumers can do it. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like, is that the right way of thinking about it, or do you think I'm?
No, I think this is a moment with a classical definition of things have gone viral, right? I mean, at this point in time, someone can download an agent, they can use it, they can ask it to do something, and it's actually remarkable at what it can do. And it's also very scary in that sometimes it has no constraint. Sometimes it exercises poor judgment and does things. And then, like if the thing with this is if it does something wrong, you can get mad at it and it just tells you that I'm sorry, but I can't really go out and revert it to what it used to be. And so an apology is not a guardrail. And so you have to kind of figure out a way that you create these things with a level of safety and security for people. But I do feel like it is completely game changing in how people are going to operate, how work is going to get done, how each one of us are going to become managers of agents, and these agents are going to work 7/24 on our behalf. And in fact, it's creating a level of anxiety in people because they're like, well, I need to make sure I assign my agent with some things to do because it's just so efficient.
Right. Right. I think when you talk to people who are like, I don't know, like really involved in this, they'll kind of give you this like, you're worrying too much. Like you really have to prompt it to get it to do crazy stuff, like, delete your whole email inbox. Like, we hear these stories. Like it's not, it's actually pretty reliable. Um, you're a security person. I mean, you're now president of the company, but I think when I first met you, you were in charge of security. I'm sure you have there's kind of a risk averse part of you that is like thinking about all the possibilities. But do you think we're being like overly cautious?
I I I don't think so. I think firstly, I feel like the upside potential in this is huge, and anyone that doesn't really get skilled and dexterous and fluent with this stuff is going to be left behind. So in no way, shape, or form do I believe that this is not something that you should pay attention to, you should get smart at, and you should actually learn how to use. Categorically, it's going to be a prerequisite for success. Um, it is extremely important, though, that you understand the risks as you go about doing things. And this is like any other technology. It's like, when aviation came into effect and people started flying, and flying was really good, but you need to understand the risks, and you need to understand the risks of driving, and you need to understand the risks of a bunch of things that we do on an ongoing basis. This is no different from that standpoint. The only thing is you're giving it so much agency. And yes, you can say, I gave an example in my keynote at RSA that said something as simple as, hey, plan my offsite for me and make sure that you handle everything, could actually go sideways pretty fast because it plans your offsite and does things that you didn't intend it to do. And then before you knew it, it had taken out $40,000 from your bank account and actually paid someone with something. So like these are things that are not, they're not just fictitious scenarios. They could happen. And you are right. It doesn't happen every single time, but it could happen. And so you as a consumer should be careful before you give access to your systems and your identity to an agent, that you understand that the agent has no fear of consequence. And so you then therefore have to put the guardrails around it.
Yeah. What is something that you've done, like in your experimentations, like anything? I'm sure you get this question all the time, but I'd love to know, like, what's the latest thing where you're like, oh my God, mind blown. Like, I can't believe it's doing this for me.
I think the things that have been really, really interesting is for me, the use case that altered my life was learning. You know, I took over this job um, close to 2 years ago now. It'll be 2 years in August. Um, and I didn't know much about a lot of the domains because Cisco is such a broad company with so many different businesses that it's impossible to be an expert in every single one of them. And I didn't know a lot about a lot of the areas of the business that I was taking over. And the speed at which I was able to come up to speed was something that I would have not been able to do without AI. That was before agents came about. Now, um, me just being able to monitor what's going on within the market and actually feeding me the things that I need to be fed. And when I have, kind of questions that it can go out and do some deep research for me, it can do some competitive analysis for me. It's like I have a group of like 6 or 8 people that are always with me that I can ask to do something, and I'll go do it and come back. And so it's a pretty phenomenal way that you can you can aid it to allow you to make decisions in a very compressed amount of time, in a very informed way. And so that's just one example. I think you'll see more and more. Like I have to be a little bit more cautious on like how crazy I get with this because you're a Section 16 officer, you're running a security business with, and also I tend to be a little bit more paranoid about how we do these things, but and so um, I'm going to create a whole setup for myself in the way that we do this, and it's going to have Cisco's security capabilities in place. And until that happens, I feel like you can't have meaningful access given to your systems. But over time, I'd say, when I say over time, in the next 3 months, all of us will be using this the way that we use email.
Yeah. Do you think, speaking of being paranoid, I'm wondering, you're right in the middle of the AI data center build out, which is a great place to be. I mean, it's like back in a lot of ways back to the old days. Just for Cisco, massive amount of growth, but we're starting to run up against some of these supply chain bottlenecks now. Like memory is the big one everyone's talking about. I have a feeling there'll be more, um, and it's like everyone's out there just trying to like lock up their supply of products. Is Cisco doing that? Are you out there having to figure out how to make sure that you don't get like, someone else doesn't like take away, take away your supplies of some critical component?
Well, our business, because we're at scale, we are able to use that scale to our benefit, and lock up a level of supply and all of that stuff. But I will say that we're not at all immune to any of the. It's one thing which is a supply. It's another thing which is the price for that supply, and the price for the supply right now, like memory prices have gone up like astronomically, and then those memory as part of the bill of materials for some of the products we sell is a pretty large percentage. In some cases, not as large. In other cases, it's pretty large. But in either event, your price point does go up, which then needs to be passed on to the customer. You know, and so I do feel like what is happening right now is the data center build-outs. It goes back to what we were talking about. Think about the amount of infrastructure that's going to be needed if there's going to be trillions of agents in the world. And these agents are working 7 by 24, and everyone's job is to just keep these agents busy on our behalf. We are grossly underestimating the level of infrastructure that's going to be needed. And the reason you're seeing component shortages is because our limiter is going to be how much power, how much compute, how many components, and how much network bandwidth you can actually have. We simply don't have enough to satiate the needs of AI today. And that is not something that is at all a hyperbolic statement. And then when you look out 7 to 10 years and you look at what the demand signal needs to look like for infrastructure build out, we are grossly underestimating the amount of infrastructure that's needed compared to what we're building out right now. And that is at the tune of like, if you spend $4 or $5 trillion, I think we're going to be grossly underestimating the level of capacity needed.
I mean, when you talk about price, obviously, like the people building token factories are going to they're going to be willing to pay the most, right? So, do you have to like, and that's not your only customer.
Paying the most, but they're going to pay the least amount in unit cost, right? The higher the token factory, the more discount they'll want on a unit cost basis. The cost per token goes down for them, but the amount of absolute spend goes up.
But does that mean, I mean, those aren't your only customers, right? Does that mean you have to sort of say like, okay, I'm going to prioritize the token factory customer over everyone else because they're willing to buy the most, they'll outbid everybody?
No, it's a balancing act. And in a supply constrained environment, it becomes a balancing act. And so if you think about it, we support hyperscalers, neoclouds, sovereign clouds, service providers, and enterprise. If you do, and you have to balance between those, and you can't give all your supply to one or the other. So we have to make sure that we're carefully doing a balancing act across the board because you want to make sure that all those customers are hydrated. Not having any of those class of customers working with you because you don't have enough supply for them doesn't make any sense. So you can't give all your supply to the highest consumer. And that's the nature of a supply constrained business. And data center has been a supply constrained business now for a while.
Yeah, since the ChatGPT moment. I mean, I agree with you that people are underestimating what's about to happen, and I think it's partly because like the news comes out in drips and drabs. Like it was like, oh, we need more energy. Oh my God, our energy price is going to go up. We sort of had that conversation. Now we're having like, oh, the memory prices are going up. I can't believe what my
The future is here. It's just not evenly distributed yet.
right.
That's what it is I feel like the profound shift that we're going to go through on multitude of dimensions, it's just worth taking inventory of that sometimes, right? Like, look at all the things that are going to happen. You're going to have agents that automate a ridiculous amount of work that you're doing today, as a result of which your entire apparatus and your entire workforce has to be rethought in the way in which you configure it. People might not be doing the actual work. People might be managing the work, and every single individual becomes a manager of agents. And these agents aren't like tools. They're going to be like digital coworkers that are augmented teammates to your environment. And like, for example, coding is going to be within a year, 12 to 15 months, it's going to be very hard to find humans writing code, because code is going to be given and delegated to agents to write. So the difference between delegation and trusted delegation will be the difference between bankruptcy and market leadership, you know. And so that's one dimension, is that, you know, these agents are going to there's going to be human bottlenecks again, but the bottleneck is not going to be what it used to be. So coding is a bottleneck today. Generating code is not going to be the bottleneck. Reviewing of code is today the bottleneck. Within 3 months, 5 months, that'll be solved. And so then what does the bottleneck become? Human judgment, human intuition, actually thinking through deeply. There was a study that came out today from Harvard that talked about how it's actually causing a level of anxiety and fatigue in people as they start thinking about agents, because it's just so hard to even keep up, right? So that's one dimension. The second dimension is the geopolitical dimension is going to be so profound, in the sense that the world is going to get much more nationalistic. And as it gets nationalistic, these data centers are going to be built out all throughout the world. And you have a very different software architecture that you will have to evolve to, compared to the one that exists today, that actually takes account of different levels of sovereignty that you're going to need to adhere to in different parts of the world. From, okay, I'm just going to have a data center in some geography, to I'm going to need to make sure that that geography is owning and operating the data center, to now they need to have some kind of a kill switch so that they have some backup in case like the SaaS service goes down, they can back up to an on-prem data center, to they only have an on-prem, kind of this is a set of technologies where nothing else is available in the cloud. So there's a bunch of those things that will happen. So there's a technology shift, there's a geopolitical shift, and then there's a workforce shift that'll happen, which is like, how is the workforce going to get configured physically, and what roles will make it in the future, what roles will be eliminated, and how are you going to be thinking about retraining your workforce for being ready for the next era, while being fluent and dexterous in AI, you know? And I think these are like non-trivial changes all happening all at once that are going to be pretty fascinating to be part of.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a weird time when you have this gap. Like, there's this period where the whole global economy reorients around, you know, from the supply chain to the workforce, reorients around like, how do we produce tokens? And that's data centers, that's physical stuff like copper and silicon, and then who's consuming all these tokens? And there's a lag period there where things get expensive, right? It's hard to get things. There's shortages of things, and you know, because it's almost like a wartime economy in a way.
It is like it was one thing I was pondering the other day. I posted something on Twitter on X as well on it, which is, if you believe for a moment that software is going to get commoditized because it can be written so easily, then what is the moat for a company, right? And I could think of like 5 that came off the top of my head. But the first moat that you're going to have is what I call the cultural moat. And the cultural moat meaning that the ability to operate at speed with scale and be able to do it for long durations of time, where you can always be, or most of the times be, early to market, because it becomes a force of habit, is going to be a superpower that a company will have. Like, you just constantly staying ahead, because if you're twice as good as your competition, even, it won't matter if it's only for a little bit of time, because if you can do something in 3 days, the competition does it in 6 days, it's not that big a deal. But if you do that over a course of a year and 2 years and 3 years, you will create meaningful distance from your competition. So that's the first moat. The second big moat is the trust moat. Can you figure out a way to securely delegate work versus just delegate work? If you securely delegate work, you're going to be meaningfully better as a company than if you just delegate work. Number 3 is going to be the tokenomics moat, which is, are you able to actually think through and figure out an economic way where the amount of tokens you're consuming, that token consumption is going to be um, generating the most amount of output at the least amount of dollar per watt. Um, and if you can do that in the right way, then you will have an advantage over someone else just from a cost economics perspective. Number four is the over time the judgment that you're going to build on what to go out and double down on, because in this world of abundance of I can write any code and any software, your ability to discern slop from high value stuff is going to be extremely important. And so I think, and then the fifth one was just human talent. If you have more human talent that's dexterous with AI compared to another company by, let's say, 30%, 40%, like, my God, the amount of advantage you're going to have over someone that's not that dexterous with AI is going to be night and day, because it's the person who's dexterous with AI is not going to be 20% better than the one that's not. The person who's dexterous with AI is going to be 50x better than the person that's not, because they're going to have all these agents working for them. And that just unlocks a whole lot of potential, but also puts a lot of risk, because those people that actually are slow movers on new technology adoption, I think they're going to be in for a world of hurt if they don't actually we have to reskill those people systematically in society. Otherwise, society is going to have a lot of suffering.
Yeah, yeah. And you talk about like the part about deploying it securely. There was, I'm sure you saw this, like in your, it's RSA right now. The whole that, did you see the Andre Karpathy tweet where he talked about this dependencies, and I mean, and you're just like, oh my God, like it was sort of like a needle in a haystack, thing that somebody caught by chance because, it was like a vibe coded vulnerability that used too much RAM, and that's how it was caught. But it could have been like huge disaster. And I just wonder, like, how do we stop that from happening, or do we just have to accept the fact that there's just going to be?
Well, so I think like the speed of weaponization is going to be exponentially increased and compounded on a daily basis, because these adversaries are using these agents, and these agents work 7/24. And if you direct them in the right way, as diligent as they are at doing things for you to go out and make your hotel reservation, they're going to be just as diligent in finding a way to breach the system. And if you go breach critical infrastructure like hospitals and power grids, like a whole host of other problems start to emerge. So the only way you can solve that is by making sure that your defenses are also at machine scale. And, so far the model has been, we prioritize the alerts because you're trying to make sure that you don't have, you get the right amount of signal from the noise, and you have alert fatigue. So you prioritize the alerts, and only 20% of the vulnerabilities identified actually ever get addressed and patched. We have to, in a very fast pace, move to an agentic security operations center where every alert and every signal is assessed in real time, and you have to detect anomalies. And I don't think you can just say, I'm going to be selective about the alerts that I get. Like, the only way to not experience alert fatigue is by having an agent be the one that's going out and looking at the alerts. And so I think, like, when you think about our business in Splunk is going to be completely agentic in the SOC, and you will see that with not just us, but with others as well. If you're a SOC that is not agentic, you will not be a relevant SOC. It just won't make sense. And so those are the kind of things that I think we have to keep in mind, is the speed at which we need to respond is going to be very different compared to the way that we are right now.
How do you think about it? I mean, it sounds like you're sort of talking about on an enterprise level, and I know that's your business, but I mean, there's not, like, for individuals, as people start experimenting with OpenClaw and all this stuff, I mean, like, there's no antivirus. It's like, I remember, remember as a kid, like, you'd install like antivirus software on your computer, and like that doesn't even exist yet in this era, does it? I mean,
It doesn't yet. I think it'll be a market for it, and I think there'll be a lot of things that'll have to come out for the consumers. Like, for example, it's bonkers that you have to go out and buy a Mac Mini to go out and run OpenClaw. I should be able to run it on my machine. And I should just be able to have some kind of guardrail on my machine to say, hey, run. And by the way, that is essentially what OpenShell was that NVIDIA announced. And that's what we announced on top of OpenShell, which is DefenseClaw. And DefenseClaw is a hook that goes into OpenShell that allows you to automatically get all of our open source services around a skills scanner and an MCP scanner, and all of these technical things that you need to do. They just automatically get instantiated without the user knowing when you're running your agent in OpenShell. And so what will happen is, because OpenShell is open source, someone will consumerize it and say, okay, here's how you'll be able to add value to it. And I'll make it easy enough for my grandmother to use it, and then make sure that OpenClaw only works within a container. And that container then will have something like DefenseClaw that allows you to make sure that anything that runs through that automatically instantiates a set of kind of security guardrails and services. And so those are the kind of things that I think will get consumerized. And the reason why it's important to have open source community become very vibrant is the market's moving way too fast, and you have to make sure that you share the learnings over here with the community, because the true enemy is the adversary. And this could be a society ending event. Imagine if a hospital gets breached, like people will not be able to get dialysis done. Imagine if a power grid, and if you have a coordinated attack on a power grid, but 20 power grids at the same time go out for a matter of like a week, you run out of food. Now, all of a sudden, you've got a whole different problem because you have to maintain law and order when humans have run out of food. So, like, I think there's a lot of risks on this side that need to get sorted for, both on the consumer side and on the enterprise side. But I think it all starts with these technologies have to be built out really fast, and everyone has to get educated to a base level on what you need to do so that you don't get, kind of sideways.
It's amazing that I was like, oh, there's no antivirus. Like, there's not even like AOL yet. Like it's not like, remember when like AOL was the internet for everyone who like couldn't figure out how to like get an ISP set up? Like, it was like, that was the internet. Like, that doesn't exist yet. There's just not like an easy way people.
For consumers, I think there's a market for an easy way to protect agents. And by the way, that is going to be like the frontier models will do that. Like I think you will I fully expect Anthropic and OpenAI and Grok and Google and all these frontier models to actually have very, very good guardrail capabilities. But the thing is the experimentation that's happening right now is happening in the wild, wild west with anything. And I think what people will have to know is there will be trusted companies and trusted systems, and then there'll be things that you don't trust. And you'll have to make sure that you apply judgment to it. And how that exactly plays out, I don't think is quite clear yet. But it's like any forming of a market, like that ecosystem builds out very quickly around it.
Yeah, and I know we're running out of time. There's one other thing I'd love to ask you about. I mean, I think this pendulum has swung back and forth between like, are you spending enough on AI infrastructure? Are you not spending enough? I think we're now in the pendulum position where I think it's becoming clear that like the real risk is companies that maybe haven't locked up enough supply, enough infrastructure, whether that's energy, chips, et cetera. And I'm just wondering, like, are we starting to see like cracks here where like some of I don't know who exactly, but some of the frontier companies are maybe like, oh God, like we maybe were too cautious with the build out?
Yeah, I think like the frontier companies are going to be okay because even though they might be cautious, what it does is there's a certain amount of finite capacity of processing, and if one of the 4 or 5 frontier companies has done a little bit less of a job of the build out, but they have good products that people want. It just takes they will figure out ways to make sure that they can actually flow more dollars to it. I actually don't worry about the frontier companies. What I worry about is the average company today and the level of competency that they have created and the cultural shift that needs to happen within their workforce to make sure that they embrace AI and do it safely and securely, and not just be frenetic about it, but be very intentional about it. I think that is going to be super important, that boards of directors and executive teams of companies need to think through this in a very kind of, how are they going out and creating their data pipelines? Or is their proprietary data that they have going to really be used to create differentiation? Where are they going to create their cultural moats and their trust moats and their tokenomics moats? And how are they going to apply judgment effectively? And what are they going to do to make sure that the kind of talent they're developing is AI fluent versus not? These are like big questions to ask while you're still also dealing with all the other pressures of the business. And if you don't do that in a rapid pace in a very compressed time period, I think you'll find yourself struggling for relevance. And that, I think, is a larger risk, is the collective economy. We cannot have every company fail except for the most savvy tech companies. Those tech companies are selling to these other companies. Those other companies have to succeed. And if they don't have the cultural apparatus to be able to succeed, then they won't really get the outcomes from this stuff. And so that's what actually has to get, that education cycle has to get really accelerated.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I can see why people have so much anxiety about this topic.
This is anxiety provoking, but it's also very exciting on what it might be able to solve for us. Like, we might be able to solve not just cancer, but all diseases. And we might be able to solve, not just getting people to get out of, some percentage of people get out of poverty, but all humans get out of poverty. And we might be able to solve every human being educated. And so those are the kind of things that I think get me excited. But you can't be rose-colored glasses about this. You have to be realistic about what the downside risks are and just accommodate and mitigate for them. It doesn't mean you don't do anything. It just means that you accommodate for the risks and then continue to keep pursuing the other stuff with, like a very rapid pace, because speed is going to be a superpower.
Yeah. Jeetu, thank you so much for the time. It's always great to see you.
Thank you for having me.